One of the most confusing experiences many people have with men is this: when something is wrong, many men become quiet. They stop explaining, they stop arguing. Sometimes they simply withdraw. To the person watching this happen, it can feel cold, dismissive. Sometimes it even feels like disrespect, but inside the mind of many men, something very different is happening. Because for many men, silence is not meant as rejection, it is meant as restraint. And the truth is, many men grow up learning a simple rule. When emotions run high, the safest thing to do is say less, not more. Many people misunderstand one habit that appears again and again in men. When tension rises, many men go quiet. They stop explaining themselves. They stop defending their position, and sometimes they simply leave the room. To the other person, this can feel like rejection. But for many men, silence is not about avoidance. It is about control. Many men grow up learning that emotional escalation is dangerous. If anger rises, someone could say something they regret. So they choose the safest option they know. They reduce the number of words. Not because they don't care, but because they are trying to prevent things from getting worse. Silence is often an attempt to keep the situation stable. The early lessons men learn. Most boys are taught something very early in life. Control yourself. Do not lose your temper. Do not create problems. And especially, do not say things you cannot take back. Many boys grow up hearing phrases like, be a man, stay calm, handle it. These messages slowly shape how many men respond to emotional tension. Instead of expressing every feeling immediately, they learn to contain it, to regulate it internally. But that internal regulation often looks like silence from the outside. So when conflict appears later in adult relationships, many men default to the strategy they know best. They reduce the emotional noise, they become quieter. Not because they feel nothing, but because they are trying to avoid making the situation worse. Silence as emotional containment. For many men, silence is not emptiness, it is processing. When emotions become intense, the male brain often shifts into a different mode, and a mode focused on problem solving rather than emotional expression. Instead of talking immediately, many men pause, they analyze what is happening, they replay the conversation internally. They search for the safest response. This process can take time, and during that time, words often disappear. From the outside, it may look like disengagement, but internally, the man may be thinking very carefully, because in many men's minds, speaking too quickly is dangerous. Words spoken in anger can damage relationships. So the instinct becomes, wait, think, then speak, or sometimes, say nothing at all. When emotions run high, men and women often respond in different ways. Many women process emotions through conversation. Talking helps organize thoughts and release tension, but many men process emotions through internal reflection. They pause, they become quiet, they step away from the conversation for a moment. This difference can create confusion. One person wants dialogue immediately, the other person needs time to stabilize internally. Neither approach is wrong. They are simply different emotional processing styles. But when this difference is misunderstood, silence can feel like neglect, and conversation can feel like pressure. Understanding this difference can prevent many unnecessary conflicts. The fear of escalation. There is another reason many men become quiet during conflict. Fear of escalation. Many men are aware that once emotions rise beyond a certain point, conversations can spiral quickly. Voices get louder, accusations appear, words become sharper. And once that escalation begins, it becomes very difficult to stop. So some men try to prevent the spiral before it begins. They slow the conversation down, or they step away from it entirely. To them, silence feels responsible. It feels controlled. But to the person waiting for a response, that silence can feel confusing or even hurtful, which is why this pattern often leads to, misunderstandings in relationships. A small story. Let me tell you about someone we'll call Marcus. Marcus grew up in a household where arguments often turned explosive, raised voices, doors slamming. As a child, he learned something important. The more people talked during conflict, the worse things became. So Marcus developed a habit. Whenever tension appeared, he became quiet. Years later, in a relationship, this habit created confusion. His partner would ask him what he was thinking. Marcus would pause and often say nothing. To him, silence meant restraint. To his partner, it felt like distance. Neither person was wrong. They were simply operating from different emotional instincts. Many men learn emotional restraint long before they understand emotional communication. They grow up hearing messages like, control yourself, don't lose your temper, stay calm. These lessons are valuable. Self-control is an important strength. But sometimes those lessons come with an unintended side effect. Men learn how to contain emotion, but not always how to express it. So, when conflict appears, their instinct becomes silence. Not because they lack feelings, but because silence feels safer than saying something they might regret. Self-control is a strength, but without expression, it can look like distance. The difference between withdrawal and regulation, there is an important distinction here. Not all silence is the same. Some silence is avoidance, but some silence is regulation. A man who storms out of a conversation to escape responsibility is avoiding, but a man who pauses to calm his emotions before speaking is regulating. From the outside, those behaviors can look identical, but internally they are very different. One is disconnection, the other is discipline, and this difference matters because healthy masculinity is not about suppressing emotion. It is about managing emotion responsibly. Silence in men can mean two very different things. Sometimes it means avoidance, but other times it means regulation. A man who withdraws permanently from conversations may be avoiding responsibility, but a man who pauses, reflects, and returns to the conversation later is doing something different. He is managing his emotions before speaking. That kind of restraint is often misunderstood because emotional control does not always look expressive. Sometimes it looks quiet. Real strength is not always loud. Sometimes it is the ability to pause instead of reacting, learning a healthier balance. The healthiest relationships often emerge when both people begin to understand each other's emotional rhythms. Men can learn to express what they are feeling more clearly, and others can learn that silence does not always mean rejection. Sometimes it simply means, I need a moment to think. Communication becomes easier when both people understand that emotional processing can take different forms. Some people process through conversation. Others process through reflection. Both approaches can be healthy when they are respected. Many relationship conflicts are not caused by lack of love. They are caused by misunderstanding emotional behavior. One person interprets silence as indifference, and the other person believes silence is responsible restraint. Neither intention is malicious. But without understanding, the gap between those interpretations can grow. When both people recognize that emotional processing styles differ, something important happens. The conflict becomes easier to navigate. Because the silence is no longer mysterious, it becomes understandable. Understanding changes the meaning of silence. Let's close here. For many men, silence has never been about emotional absence. It has been about emotional containment, a way of preventing escalation, a way of protecting relationships from impulsive words. But silence alone is not always enough. Healthy masculinity eventually learns something deeper. Not just how to control emotion, but how to communicate it. Because respect in relationships is not built on silence alone. It is built on understanding of emotion, understanding of intention, and understanding of the different ways human beings process what they feel. If this conversation resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on your own patterns of communication, and if you want to continue exploring the psychology behind male emotional experience, stay connected, because understanding how men think and feel is one of the most powerful ways to improve relationships with others and with yourself.